Chuck, good morning.
Good morning.
Let's start at the beginning. It's 1971, 1972. You're 19 years old. You're playing high school or college football, not very serious, having a good time, but spend a lot of time working on your family farm. And your dad comes along and says, I want to start a winery, but only if you want to be involved. And if you don't want to be involved, I'm going to sell the property. And as the rumor goes, I'm moving to Australia. I don't know if that's true or not. Tell me what really went on at that moment.
Well, all that you stated is true. There's no doubt about that. And they were thinking about Australia because there were tax advantages about moving there at the time. They were calling in people that were interested to get into business, and my father was very interested about that. However, my dad was a home winemaker almost all of his life, and a good one at that. In fact, I would say that part of why my parents wanted to get into the business is because the farmer neighbors around the area of Rutherford would often say to my father, "Charlie, your wine is really good, and you should make wine commercially." So I think that's planted the seed with him. So I was a third of three children. My two sisters were already gone out of state, one of them, and elsewhere the other. And I was the last child. So here I was, a year out of high school, and they did give me that offer. But how they brought that offer to me was very curious because in those days, parents didn't really speak to children, right? We were just raised in the house, and it was nothing particular. If you were having trouble with arithmetic, they didn't hire a tutor like we do nowadays. We run down and get help for our kids. And you just were raised. And so when my mom and dad sat me down at the age of 19 for a talk in the kitchen at the table, it was completely out of character. And with that, I was a little concerned about what was going to be said. But my father did say, your mother and I would like to start a small commercial winery if you'll join us. And if you don't, we're going to sell the property and move to Australia. So I instantly said yes. And I went to work in November of 1971, pruning vines with my dad. And we pruned for 4 months to prune our 55 acres of grapes at the time. Got to know my father as a co-worker, more so than just a father figure. So we prepared for the next year, 1972. We did a lot of the building ourselves. My dad also did the electricity in the building. We built a 3,000 square foot utility building, which we call the winery. Basically hung the sign up that stated Caymus Vineyards. Caymus was a name my dad chose. It's a Spanish land grant name, so it's historical in Napa Valley. About the middle point, about 11,000 acres around the Rutherford area, spanning from Rutherford to Yountville, from hilltop to hilltop, was owned by George Yount, and it was called Rancho Caymus. So that's the origin of the name. We're a very small part of that, of course, in Rutherford. So we went to work, and we just worked hard and made wine our first year, not much, 250 cases of Cabernet. And my father put a price tag on it of $4.50 a bottle. And with that, the wine didn't sell very quickly because no one knew about us, and how would they? So word of mouth began to work for us. People began to stop by.
So my understanding reading your history is that from like age 9 or 11, you started operating a tractor and you would work in the fields. I don't know if you got paid or not, but you had a lot of experience in the field. But when he said, let's start a winery, did you understand what he was saying? Did you know what a winery was and what that meant going forward?
Yes, I did. And if anything, Marvin, I was quiet to my friends, the remaining friends that I had around the Napa Valley. I never told them we were getting in the wine business because there were the big five wineries. There's Beaulieu, Charles Krug, Inglenook, Beringer, and maybe a couple others. And small wineries were just not the thing to do. And I was more concerned that what other people, my friends, might think if we were getting into the wine business. Like, who do you think you are to compete in the wine business with these professionals? So I knew that part, and I think that probably scared me more than learning about making wine, growing grapes, and that sort of thing.
Readers probably don't realize that your ancestors go back a long time in Napa Valley, and they actually owned vineyards long before Prohibition. Could you talk a little bit about your ancestors' involvement in Napa? Because it's very rare to this day.
Yeah, and another thing to add to that, Marvin, is both the Wagner side and my mother and father's sides have been there for generations, and but the oldest, the first time that my family entered Napa Valley was 1857. They came from Bible Grove, Missouri, on wagon train, a train that was led by my second great grandfather. They entered into Sacramento in 1857 with 44 individuals. They bought their first land in Napa Valley in the Oak Knoll district, 70 acres, and they bought that in 1858. They did plant crops, and I don't know if they planted vineyard right away, but I can say this, that by the 1880s, they were involved with the wine business, making wine and working, especially on the early years, with Inglenook.
But they were farmers. They were not making wine. They were growing grapes.
They
correct?
were growing grapes, but my great grandfather of that leg of the family, he ended up going to work for Inglenook and producing wine for Gustav Niebaum.
And then there were vineyards that were bought like in 1905 or something, and on and on. And then,
well, my father's side came in 1906,
Yeah.
and they bought vineyards. But my mother's side was already in the vineyard business and had owned land.
Yeah.
So we have a new wine called the Walking Fool. It's actually a moniker that was given my great grandfather on my mother's side.
Yeah.
His name is Johannes Gloss, and he actually homesteaded on Hell Mountain and raised vineyard there.
So what happened to all these enterprises during Prohibition?
Prohibition shut everything down for many, many families. I understand there were about 300 wineries in Napa Valley at that time. And so Prohibition came. The only people that could remain in business that were able to make sacramental wine, and such as Beaulieu. Otherwise, everyone changed their focus and pulled out grapevines and planted prunes and walnuts and tree crops and you name it.
So I think that's probably a very interesting part of the Wagner story, because so many wineries and winery families in Napa, in North Coast, don't have a history. You know, it's like new, and you are older than most. I don't know who's older, but are there any that are older? I mean, it's quite amazing to me. So we're back to 1971, 72. By the way, that's the time that I started coming to Napa and Sonoma and so forth. But I'd like you to describe what Napa Valley was like in those days, because today's readers who are new to Napa Valley could never ever understand or appreciate what a sleepy, rural nothingville the community was way back then.
Well, I believe it was lazy, quiet, and it was a good upbringing. But I would say it was none different than any other valley of Napa, of California at the time. Napa was nothing special. I think the primary crop was prunes, and the secondary crop may have been beef, and third crop may have been grape growing, in 1972, something like that. Let's see. All the bells and whistles that Napa Valley has these days, whether it's the fine restaurants or resort getaways, multitude of wineries and venues.
Well, I was going to ask you, do you remember the restaurants of the early 70s in Napa and the hotels? Where did you sleep? Where did you eat?
Well,
the people that came there.
There were very few, and they weren't hotels, they were motels.
Yeah.
No, there's just a handful, and we didn't have high-end food. Actually, the first food that came into Napa Valley that was important was Cindy Paulson when she opened Mustards in Yountville, and that began, just began the new era of food. Food and wine at some point in time joined hands and became a culture itself, and I think that was a great thing. It was a good thing for our business. Nowadays, Napa's changed. It's no longer that rural, lazy little town, and it's with 3.5 million visitors a year. I mean, if anything, we're probably more concerned about having too much visitation due to the traffic it brings. But it's a beautiful place. I would say everyone should, at least once in their life, visit Napa Valley.
I'm reminded that I used to stay at a place called Las Robos Lodge that was on 29. A room was $15, no phone, no TV, one bed, one lamp, no dresser, and that was it, baby. That's all you got. And I don't even remember where I would eat. There was, breakfast places. There was
That's right.
dumps and diners. And today we have Meadowood and Auberge and all these other great resorts. And God knows how many great restaurants with great chefs.
Yep.
It's like night and day. Do you remember the economy in those days?
Well, I can say, for our economy around that rural Rutherford area, there were a handful of growers, farmers that were friends of my father. And so maybe this paints a picture. I don't think anybody bought a new car without it being a big deal, or if somebody bought a new tractor, everybody talked about it. It was a big thing to buy a tractor and to be able to afford that. I think it's changed incredibly.
So now Chuck leaves school and he's now working at a winery with his father. And I want to spend a minute or two on your dad before I go forward, because I knew your dad, and I have my own impressions of him, but I'd love to know, as a son, the good, the bad, and the ugly of Charlie.
My gosh. I'll tell you, I can't say an ill word about my father. We started off working, I would say, nervously and concerned that we weren't going to make it in the wine business. And we never had an argument. For the 30 years we worked together. Always pointed in the right direction. We probably always agreed on what a good glass of wine should taste like. We tried to probably drive home the image that Caymus was what we're promoting and what we're producing and creating. It's not so much about Charlie Wagner or Chuck Wagner. I think that my father, to a large degree, was selfless and a genuine, honest, hardworking person. So that was my father. A good man.
I recall him as being very serious, not funny, and I had the impression that, although he didn't want me to know, he was very demanding of you. Is that true?
Well, I think he was demanding, but Marvin, he didn't have to demand much. I was just born to work hard, and I took care of business best I could. I will say, as time went on, it only took a few years when my father became the front person for Caymus and worked in the tasting room. and sold our products. And then I took over the vineyard first and then the winery second. I believe I learned most everything my father knew about both viticulture and winemaking. And with that, we had a little bit of, and still today, we call in some people to give us some tutoring. You know, that's our business. All businesses are that way these days.
Okay, so it was a very small organization. And talk to me about the first decade, the decade of the 70s, how Caymus got its legs. And at what point did you realize that you had a potential success on your hands with a great future? If you ever did in those years. When? When was the turning point?
About the time the Spectator came online, I would say. But actually our first credit we received was through a fellow by the name of Robert Finnegan, who had a wine newsletter called Finnegan's Private Guide to Wine. Robert was syndicated in some of the newspapers, including the local San Francisco Chronicle Examiner. And he wrote up our 1973 Cabernet as being excellent wine in his opinion. And so we realized that the phone began to ring and realized that was how we're going to make our business, how we're going to get our name around. So that was a very small circle compared to, you know, the Wine Spectator circle that eventually emerged to be international, which I thank you for that, from the industry. That was a tremendous thing that you've done for all vintners of the world and consumers. So with that, we struggled for years. I often said that we felt as though we didn't have a successful business until we were into it for 18 years.
So what year would that be? The late 80s?
90, something like that.
And what, you woke up one morning and what'd you say? I mean, because your sales had been going up, correct? Did you have any bad vintages per se where you couldn't sell your wine?
We had a couple poor vintages in there. 1977 was a drought year, second drought year in a row, and we didn't irrigate our vines. We still do a lot of dry farming, but in those days, irrigation was never considered. So when you had drought, it really affected the vines because you had no supplemental water. So our vines in 1977 didn't ripen the crop. They ran out of gas. They began to defoliate, and we picked the crop. It wasn't mature grapes and ended up being a light-colored Cabernet that was tea-like in character. We didn't make special selection that year. As a matter of fact, looking back, we probably shouldn't have bottled any of the wine. It didn't age. It never did turn out to be a good wine. But otherwise, I think every year we got a little better on.
So when you had that issue with the 77, did that affect your ability to pay your bills?
No. We were always cautious. To this day, we're cautious. So we don't overborrow. That's for sure.
So we're now closing in a 1990, responding to what you just said. What occurred in your mind that made you realize that you're here to stay, and not only are you successful, but you're very excited about the next steps in the development of Caymus?
Yeah. Well, I think 1990 was a pivotal moment for the wine industry. 1990 was a great year worldwide, and it really was the first year that, in my mind, where you could compete with anybody that produced wine in the world. We were given a stage. We were producing wine that had stylistically had some prominence and some character that people liked, especially compared to other wines of regions of the world. So 1990 felt like that was a very important year for that reason. Felt like we had a chance to make a a go of it, and that we could get better and drive the flag up the pole for Caymus.
But are you saying it was driven by a great vintage in which you made a great wine, or was it a culmination of the 18 years of developing the brand, developing the vineyards, perfecting the quality of the wine, etc.? You seem to be giving a lot of credit to the vintage.
Yeah. You know, Marvin, there was a time when I was not afraid to put our wine on any table against any wine. And I think that's about 1990 is when that occurred. You know, it could not only grace any table, but it could be paired along any important wine of the world. I want you to know how important that felt to me at that moment. At least I believed that was the case, and I still believe that today.
Do you recall what you released the 1990 bottle for in those days? The first release price on it?
Well, the special selection or the Napa. So the Napa was probably at $18 to $22 somewhere in there.
And the special selection?
I believe we might have been at 36.
So explain to the readers, why should they pay extra for special selection? What's the difference between the two?
I say if you look at all wineries and they have the standard model, so to speak,
and then they have a
and the reserve style,
yeah.
you know.
Yeah.
I think Caymus, more than any other, those two wines have more similarity. And our primary clientele and our image is based on our Caymus Napa Valley bottling, not special selection. Special selection, I do believe, is a superior wine by a point or two, but it still encompasses this stylistic similarities. A little more tannin, more ageability, maybe a nuance more oak, a little more flair.
Different vineyards?
It's special selection is the best wine produced in the vintage, regardless of where it came from in Napa Valley.
Yeah.
The wines are tasted blind and then chosen. So for any given year, especially if it's a cooler year versus a warmer year, we may end up in Coombsville one year, Rutherford the next, and Calistoga the next.
Is it vinified the same way? Or is it different?
It is vinified the same way, and every lot of grapes that comes into the winery are fermented to become special selection. They're the best quality we can make.
Okay. Today, and then we'll go back, but how large is your Napa Valley Cabernet and how large is special selection? What's the ratio between the two?
We're somewhere in the range of 200,000 cases for the Napa Valley. And we're in the range of 25 to 30,000 cases of special selection.
How many other wineries in Napa Valley can claim that kind of volume for their Cabernet?
None that I know of.
Those are incredible numbers. And you sell it all.
Well, listen, Marvin. It's not necessarily. I want to say this. I think that stylistically, we're wine consumers. I love wine, and I don't get these hard, stiff, tart wines that I like wines that are supple, round, and rich, and I think that probably that style rings a bell with a lot of consumers across the board. I mean, as humans, we probably like some of the same characters widely, and I think that's really our focus.
All right, so let's go forward a little bit. Now we're into the 90s, 2000s, and so forth, and there's something that's happening. You went from a sleepy industry, which didn't have a real wine appreciation. It wasn't a wine drinking culture. All of a sudden, things are happening. You don't know what's happening, but things are happening. And then you're driving down the road and you see construction for a winery, and then you go down a half a mile, see another one. Then you go on a side road, you see another one, and before you know it, Napa Valley, the valley, the mountains, everywhere are dotted with buildings that they call winery. What the fuck is going? Excuse me. What is going on in Napa Valley?
Well, I would say that a lot of people come to Napa Valley to visit. They've made their mark elsewhere. Yeah. They fall in love with the Napa Valley. They buy a house, maybe a vineyard or property, have it planted, and produce wine.
How did this affect you, though? Because one by one, a new winery after winery is being established. They're putting their wines on the market. The market is absorbing it, but there's always question about when is there going to be a glut, and then we see prices driving up. At some point, did you become self-concerned about survival or whether or not the good times were going to end? Was there ever a time when you got real worried about the future, A, of Napa Valley wine, and B, your own business, or you were secure by this point?
We were secure. However, I'm always concerned about things changing. So we keep our eyes on the marketplace and see what's happening. I think a lot of those new wineries that started up, there's probably going to be some successes, and there'll probably be many broken dreams. And at times, I suppose there are a few members of the winemaking community that are maybe just into it because they want to be into it. Not necessarily it was based on a return on investment. I think we might have more than a few of those in Napa Valley. With Caymus, our pricing, we probably could increase our prices. I fear doing that. I don't want to get caught up in that. So we take what we think is a reasonable profit, and that's how we mark up our wines. Prices are going up in Napa all the time, so we'll have some increases. But could we sell our wine for the Napa Valley wine for $100 or $200 a bottle? Well, we might be able to, but that's not what this business is about. This is about producing a product that that tastes good, that more people can reach.
So, there's been a number of critics in recent years that certain Cabernets, granted limited production, anywhere from 300 to 2,000 cases more or less, are charging $500, $800, $1,000, some even more. Is this bad for the industry? Or if they can get the price, why not?
Both. I'd say there's some negatives for the industry because it puts Napa on a pedestal of pricing, and some people would feel it's overpriced. I fear that that's a possibility. And listen, the wine that's made across the world can also be very good. I think improvements are made from Italy and Spain and France to America. So that would be a problem. As far as selling a wine for a lot of money, and to each his own, if that's what they like to do, and that's the way the ball bounces. Mm-hmm.
The wine industry is so complicated and fragmented. Do you feel competition or pressure from within, meaning other Napa Valley Cabernets, as example, or from without, from the great wines of Bordeaux and Burgundy, and even the great Tuscan wines, but wines from around the world? Does that enter into your concern about oversaturation and competition in the wine world?
So I'll answer this in another way. I think that we've arrived at a spot stylistically that is unique in the world, I believe. I think Caymus Cabernet tastes different than other Napa Valley Cabernets. That distinction is due to how we grow grapes and make the wine. I think that in the world of wines, I love grape Barolo and all great wines. Well, they all taste different. We taste different. And I think our style is our own, and it's part of our success.
Wine producers, distributors, retailers, restaurateurs have enjoyed great success over the last decade or two with the explosion in wine appreciation in America. Some think we're at a crossroads now, and that the robust growth and success is now going to be only enjoyed by the nimble few, as opposed to anyone who produced the wine 10 years ago could sell it. That may not be true today or tomorrow. What's your thinking regarding the future of wine consumption in general, and then more specifically, fine wine?
Well, I think that's it's always been the case that some people are going to achieve success and others are not. So it's always been mixed. Maybe there's a little more pressure on. There's a negative. What I understand, maybe some people aren't selling wine as quickly as they'd like that are high-priced wines. Consumers, are our consumers changing? Are they getting younger? Are they looking elsewhere? Are they looking for whiskey, or just not wanting to drink what their parents drink? I think those are all potentially hurdles in front of us. But when it comes down to wine, it's just such a civilized drink, and it can be consumed when you eat. It's shared. It's a shared bottle when you share food. My father said years ago that with one bottle of wine, 4 strangers can become friends. And I think that's still true. I think it's different than spirits, as example. And it's very civilized.
See, I just want to mention, with cigars, it takes 4 cigars for 4 strangers to become friends. Not one bite, so you have an advantage over the cigar industry. I just thought about that.
Yeah.
So is there any evidence in your mind of the younger wine consumer? I always have thought about, as far as the magazine business is concerned, I'm not going to spend any money going after younger people. As they grow older, as they become better educated, as they travel more, as they earn more money, they're going to find that they want to learn and become educated about wine. They're going to find the Wine Spectator, but I don't know how it works for wine. In your mind, do you think that the younger people today who may not be drinking wine, or they're drinking something else, or low alcohol wine or non-wine, or they're, as you say, whiskey or other cocktails and so forth, do you see them trading up, trading over, or do you see just a more competitive minefield out there?
Well, my hopes are that they're going to trade up as they get older and settle down. And I think wine is part of that civilized moment.
There are some people that are pessimists.
Of course. There are. And wine does have alcohol. There's no doubt about that. I mean, it's in a way it's dangerous for some people, but I don't think that's the norm. I think there's a lot of people that really just enjoy their evening, and whether it's a Friday or Saturday night after a week's work, and just want to have a bottle of wine and with some friends or family and just enjoy life. It's a detail that I think is very important.
Let's change gears and talk about Wagner family. I believe you have 4 children. I know you have 4 children. At least I know about 4 children. Could you sort of walk me through, starting with Charlie, who's the oldest, and give me what role they have in the family business and what the vision is for the family business? Starting with Charlie.
Well, I think Charlie started pretty young. So he's an accomplished winemaker and seasoned in the business. I would say for 3 of my 4 kids are in the wine business. The 3 that are in the business, I believe, have their sights set on producing a good product and not necessarily their own egos. I think that's a big thing for the family. Joey is my second son. He was our Pinot Noir specialist. So we're launching the first Pinot Noir under Belglas, my mother's maiden name. So Joey was making Belglas Pinot and had carved out his own distinct style for that wine. But also, he began to produce a wine called Meiomi. And Meiomi was a value brand, sold at about $20 a bottle. And his timing was right because we had the economic downturn in 2008. So if you recall also, that's Sideways was a movie that really set the hook deep on Pinot Noir. And it seemed like thousands of acres got planted into Pinot Noir along the coastline of California due to a movie. But after the economic downturn in 08, 9, 10, a lot of those grapes were just coming into production, and there were no takers. There weren't high-end wineries lined up to buy those grapes. So Joey was able to buy good grapes inexpensively and produce a $20 wine and profit. Eventually, after just less than 10 years, he was approached by Constellation to sell, and so he sold. It was his baby. Meiomi was his. So at that time, Joey left the winery, left the family business. He sold his business, so to speak, and now he's out on his own. And he's done very well with that. So he started what's called Copper Cane. He still produces Belglas Pinot Noir, but Elouan and Quilt Cabernet and several others. So he's doing very well. He's doing very well.
Do you have mixed feelings? Because he's like, he was part of the family. He stepped out on his own. I'm sure on some levels you're sad. On other levels you're proud of him and happy for him.
Oddly, you would think that when you have a falling out, you have a falling out. But we remained personally close, and so my wife and I had Christmas dinner with Joey this last Christmas, as example. And I just talked to him yesterday. So it's a very close relationship. Just the business has been separated. That's it. Am I proud of him? Yes. And am I happy that he sold? Well, looking back now, I'd say, well, it was probably a good thing for him. And it separated him and gave him his own lily pad from which he would grow Copper Cane. And that allowed, I think, my other 2 kids to prosper even further.
Yeah. It's just that, I know that, we've been friends for 40, 50 years. I mean, we sort of started around the same time. I know it was never in your DNA to sell brands. And without going into great detail, you and I talked about this before it happened, if you remember.
Yeah.
And today it's a huge brand. It just kept growing and growing and growing. And from what I understand from my research department, it's going to hit like 2 million cases this year in Constellation, which is an extraordinary success.
Which means they quadrupled the size.
Yeah.
And that was their intent.
Yeah. So your third child is Jenny, and
Yes.
what's her role in the business?
I want to say girls these days are very active in the wine business, right? Not just growing grapes, making wine. I think the attention to detail is there. She really cares about making a good glass of wine. I think that's first and foremost to Jenny. So Emilo is basically her brand. That is the maternal side. Her maternal side is Emilo, an Italian surname of a family that's been in Rutherford area since 1920s. So Jenny is making Sauvignon Blanc, Merlot, But now she's stretching out a little bit further. She's making the Walking Fool, which is named after my great-grandfather, as I mentioned. She loves the business. She loves a good glass of wine, and she's not afraid to get out there and sell that product. So she's going to be successful.
When you say her brand, do they own ownership in any of these brands, or they just are the managers of the ambassadors of the brand? How does it work?
Well, how it's set up for estate planning, I think one thing I want to say is I've always feared that upon a death that the family would have to sell the winery, our wineries. And so to go against that, we've planned prudently. And along with that, we establish a new brand. I'll appoint in an LLC my children to have a majority interest, if not total interest, of a product, of a brand. And so that is the case, and that's how we go along our business. With you never know about estate tax, and it's not going away. It seems like it's here to stay, and maybe it's going to increase. And those are real fearful for me. We're not a public company. We just can't produce money. We've got to make our own or borrow our own. It's a little different for us, and I do fear that. I want to keep this in the family, and it's important. I think, speaking of my kids, the three that are in the wine business, I think they're all dedicated, and I think they're going to remain in the business. It's up to them to see if they can convince or get their kids to go into the wine business.
So what about your fourth child, Erin? I know very little about her. How old is she? What does she do? Is she interested in wine? Not interested in wine?
Well, she's nearly 30. Yeah, she likes wine a little bit, but really, I think seeing her older siblings being in the business, it didn't feel right to her, so she chose not to be in the business. And she told me that succinctly, that Dad, I don't want to be, making wine. So that's fine with me. So she's still studying in psychology. She's living in Michigan, and she's looking to move to Nashville. So we're close, but we do not work together.
So that was very helpful. So of all the things in recent years, of your various ideas, I think you went off the charts with Suisun, and I've seen pictures of it, and I can't wait to get there. It looks breathtaking. But explain why you did it and what it is, and what role or position you see for it in the coming years.
Well, Suisun Valley is the neighboring valley to Napa. Weather conditions are shown to be very similar to Napa. In the range from Caneros all the way to Calistoga is a range of temperatures, and Suisun Valley has that same range. It's got a cool range and a warmer range like Calistoga. Soils are richer, and Cabernet loves soils.
By the way, this is absolutely delicious. You should try a sip. It's pretty good wine. This is a 2020? Oh, I don't know where the bottle is. 21.
This
really
is
good. Yeah.
just going on the market.
Delicious.
2021. Thank you. And that's our flavor.
Last night I had the 2020.
That's right.
Similar.
Similar.
Really delicious. All right, go on. Sorry.
Where was I, Marvin?
Suisun.
Oh, Suisun.
You were talking about the differences in the soil and the temperature, but why'd you go there?
Well, absolutely, there was opportunity. We could make good wine out of Suisun. It was not Napa, and it was so close to Napa yet so far away. It's just right there.
It's a half-hour drive
from Rutherford. Yeah, it's 15 minutes from Napa.
What did you planted vineyards? How many acres of vineyard? What kind of grapes? And you built a winery and so forth. Tell us about it.
Okay, well, it's split up. So farming is our number one, I think, most important part of our business, and so we're not afraid of farming. So we started with a few acres, and over the last several years now, we've gotten up to 800 acres planted in Suisun Valley. The soil there lends itself to Petit Syrah more than Cabernet Sauvignon because it's rich soil. We also do some Zinfandel. We do some Cabernet on the slopes. We have a 33-acre piece of Grenache that's south-facing, 900-foot rocky soil. Old bush vine, dry farmed as much as we can farm at dry farm to produce a high-end. So the excitement is there. I can tell you, a lot of us, my kids anyway, they share the excitement about some of these varieties we don't produce well in California. And Grenache is one of those that it's extraordinary wine. It can be extraordinary, dark in color. I mean, it's almost, stand a spoon up in that wine. It's delicious. So that's the goal. So Suisun is where it's a broad spectrum. It's a trial and error to a degree. We already know what we can produce, a good Petit Syrah, and with the Walking Fool, it's Petit Syrah. It's actually a Zinfandel Petit Syrah based. And in the Suisun Valley, the reason you haven't heard about it is because the small wineries there all sell direct to consumer. So you won't find their wines on the marketplace. The thought of three-tier, that's something new to them. As well, the Suisun Valley was growing stone fruits widely, so particularly apricots, cherries, peaches, that sort of thing, and that's now being replaced by vineyard. In total, the acreage that may go into planting, the total that could be planted in Suisun Valley could be 9,000 acres, as compared to Napa Valley's somewhere around 40,000 acres. And Napa Valley is basically fully planted. So another reason to reach out or leave Napa to look elsewhere is because Napa is fully planted and all the grapes are spoken for, and it's changed that way. And so there's the opportunity of expanding or finding new grapes is it's unavailable. So I like going out of Napa Valley, and I'm having a lot of fun with doing that.
And then you built a winery there, a warehouse there, a restaurant there. Describe it.
Well, so we have two wineries in Suisun Valley. One is a production winery that has no visitation, and it has all the busyness of wineries, which is not always the most beautiful thing, right? You've got trucks and forklifts and a lot of activity, a lot of people working. But then 6 miles from that, up in the Up Valley, Suisun Valley, we put in a winery that includes a beautiful tasting room that was beautiful by an architect, BCJ, out of they're renowned in the United States. Charlie, my son, oversaw and pointed the direction for that facility, that tasting room, to be so beautiful. It's glass. It's in a surrounding of not just vineyards and trees, but palm trees, and it's in a place of landscaping. So when you're inside the building, the doors are typically left open in the summertime, large doors, and the wind blows right through it. So it's like being outside in a very natural form. It's a beautiful place. I mean, it's beautiful to look at, but it's even more beautiful to be there. And so that's already caught on, and people like it, and they're coming into Suisun Valley like they've never come before.
So they're coming to taste wine, take a tour, and you have a restaurant there.
We don't have a restaurant yet.
Oh, you're going to have
We're on the construction.
The
yes.
pictures of it are spectacular.
Yeah, thank you.
Breathtakingly designed and so forth.
I think Charlie did a great job on that.
Yeah.
Took a lot.
Have any other Napa wineries expanded there?
No.
Are you going to produce, or are you producing a Suisun wine?
Yes, we do. We have the labels Caymus, Suisun.
Okay.
The first brand, or the first wine that we produced is called Grand Durif. Gerif is a synonym for Petite Syrah.
Right.
But we wanted to make the wine softer than typical Petite Syrah. Petite Syrah is so dark and thick and tannic and bitter. So we're making a rounder, more supple rendering of Petite Syrah. So giving it another name, such as Grand Gerif, seemed appropriate.
Recently, you sent me a bottle of a California Appalachian Cabernet
Oh, yeah.
from Caymus. Is it on the market?
It is not on the market. We've released it at the tasting room, feeling our way. Consumers seem to like it.
What is your, how much have you made of it, and what is your concern about it?
Well, we've made over 20,000 cases of this product. Marvin, I think it's a very important amendment to what we already do. I think myself, I'm a believer in that the state of California, nooks and crannies, little pockets here and there, can produce extraordinary wine. And it may not be in Napa County, it could be in Suisun Valley, but more notably Lake County, the hills and red soils, stony red soils, Paso Robles, which of course has become very, very important over the last 10 years, in San Benito County, Piscinas, and warmer reaches of Monterey County. So it's kind of just within the range along that coastline of California. You head eastward a length or two, a mile or less, and you find the weather that's right for Cabernet Sauvignon. And then within that range, you find the soil that's right for Cabernet Sauvignon. And that's something we have learned, I think, a bit more about that. Cabernet, as my dad said again, it grows like a weed. It's a very strong grower. So you need to put it in soil that's not fertile. And if you want to get the small berries and have concentrated, thick wine of high intensity and good color, you've got to be in the right soils.
All right, but here's the conflict. On the one hand, you made 20,000 cases. That's not insignificant. And yet, I have observed a hesitation on your part to go slowly, and I would like you to explain why you're so hesitant.
Why wouldn't I be? Listen, we're taking Caymus, which, since our very beginning, has always the association of Napa.
I want my reader to get it.
Yeah.
It's a bold step.
And it not without risks. I think being cautious and watch what's going on is very important. I think our consumers will buy it, potentially with some reluctance. And once they taste it, it's my hopes that they agree that it tastes like Caymus Cabernet, even though it's not from Napa Valley.
Now, what is that retailing for?
65.
So $20 below Napa Valley.
Correct.
Yeah. I've had it. I was surprised, pleasantly surprised at how good it was. And
Thank you.
I don't think you need to fear it. The only question is it so good that might cannibalize some of your existing business?
It may.
I don't think it's going to hurt your brand, because I think it's really good quality and a great value. But it's something that that I think that could be a minor concern, but a concern. But if it's expanding your base, and if that 20,000 production, in 3 years is 200,000, then it was a extraordinary decision. But I understand going slowly.
Yeah, I think it's important. Listen, look at this. Look at the opportunity that exists, and the most important part of this is that there's been a lot of great vineyards throughout the state of California that have just gotten planted and could make great wine, but never made it, or they never made it profitable. Having to over-irrigate to get a large crop and then sell it off cheap to a winery to make a less than extraordinary wine. Those guys exist out there, and there's plenty of people that, if they prescribe to our platform of how to grow, when to harvest, how we produce a wine, I think we can make a very similar wine to Caymus Napa Valley. And side by side, I think it's hard to tell the difference.
By the way, I'm tasting now a little mint in this. It's really good.
Thank you.
I mean, but this is like a new. I don't know mint so much in Caymus. I don't know what.
I didn't pick up the mint, so.
It's beautiful, beautiful. So we have Suisun, we have California Appellation, we have a lot of little brands that I see for the first time here and there. It makes me nuts. Do you have anything on the drawing boards or anything that's near fruition, or in terms of the next stage? Because I guess you don't sleep at night.
Yeah, right.
Is there anything else that you're planning that you can talk about and share with us in terms of the future of the Wagner family or the Caymus brand?
No, I think, Marvin, that the Caymus California Cabernet is probably, I'm going to hang my hat on that for the next decade or so, and maybe I'll be checking out about that time. So that's the most important part of what we're trying to achieve right now. Listen, I'm a farmer first. I keep saying that.
By the way, I'm glad you said that, because when you sent it to me a month or two ago, I got it.
Good.
So I understand its threat and its huge potential, not just for you, but for others.
And it's about quality, and it's about style.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a creation of another segment for Caymus.
Yeah. Was there a secret sauce in your success and the success of Caymus?
Probably that we didn't follow the approach that most others were following. I think tradition, as we know it, for the production of Bordeaux wines, is something we've never aspired to emulate. Maybe for a few years at the beginning, we did try to make Bordeaux style, but I think once we got our legs, we set off on our own. We did our own winemaking. We didn't hire out. I think there's a lot of wineries, high-end, expensive wineries in Napa County that utilize just a handful of winemakers and consulting winemakers that come in and make their wine. We haven't done that. So we've set ourselves apart, I think, in that regard from the norm in Napa. I think that's been a big positive for us. I'm not certain that this wine tastes anything like Bordeaux or anything like some of the other wines produced in Napa. It's clearly stylistically similar or singular.
What is your vision for your family business when you're gone? 25, 50 years from now, what would you like to see happen to your children, your grandchildren, and the Wagner family of wines?
Yeah. Well, what I'd really like, Marvin, is that what we're creating here is a brand, Caymus, and I would love that to live on. It's not necessarily about the Wagners, and it's not about selling out or going public or taking on investment. It's a brand that to be reckoned with and can expand to a degree in the world market. I think that's important. I think there are iconic brands in this world we all know. I would love that one day Caymus can become an iconic brand.
I think you've already achieved that.
Well, thank you, but I don't feel that way yet.
Last question.
Yes.
How do you want to be remembered?
Probably the way I explained my father. I think honest, hardworking, try to do the right thing, support of others, all-American, American farm boy. You know, and I'm here in New York. I love New York, but I'm a duck out of water, you know. And I still find myself going back to, at times when I want to be alone, I think that I should be remembered that I will escape and still do, climb on a tractor and work on a tractor in a vineyard and or pruning and or shoot thinning and or you name it. That really takes me back. I think it's a good foundation. I hope my kids have that same foundation. It's the reality of the business. In a business, it isn't always thought to be so real. It's so much often about egos and pricing and that sort of thing. Listen, we're taking agricultural product, we're making wine, something that is good and sells. Happy about that. Well, I think we should count our blessings on that, and that's foremost.
Well, I want to end it by saying that we've known each other for nearly a half a century. I've been wanting to do this for a long time. I have tremendous respect and admiration for you, of you. I find you to be incredibly humble and down to earth. And I think this is such a beautiful way for our reader to experience the real origins of Napa Valley from a real person whose roots are firmly entrenched in Napa Valley, with none of the marketing nonsense that goes on in our world today. And I hope they find it as enjoyable to read as I am finding it enjoyable to ask you questions. Thank you for coming.
Marvin, thank you very much.
Wine legend Chuck Wagner of Caymus Vineyards has fascinating stories about his family's 100-year history in Napa. To read the full interview with Wine Spectator editor and publisher Marvin R. Shanken, pick up the November 15th issue of Wine Spectator magazine or subscribe at winespectator.com. Also in the November 15th issue, don't miss our annual California Cabernet Tasting Report. Plus, we explore the hidden treasures of California's Suisun Valley. All that and much more in Wine Spectator's November 15th issue.